The Miami Formula One Grand Prix proved to be a very disappointing weekend delivered for Ferrari that was even the fifth fastest on the track. A truly surreal situation when we think back to the proclamations made at the start of the year, when talk of championships was in the air. Charles Leclerc finished 7th at the Miami International Autodrome in Florida, after a distant spat with Lewis Hamilton to determine who would go to pick up Kimi Antonelli. Something completely out of the ordinary, considering not only in hindsight but also while it was happening in front of fans worldwide. We need to start with a fundamental premise. The Ferrari engineers and technicians made a huge mistake with the car, and the SF-25 has no potential to offer. Simply put, the car is slow, and at present it would not win an F1 race even by accident under normal conditions, meaning without divine intervention of some sort, such as safety cars, scattered rain, and similar things. That said, Charles Leclerc's race was really frustrating. Poor Charles in his 7th year with a team that has never allowed him, except for the early months of 2022, to truly enjoy himself and experience the thrill of having a car capable of fighting for the Formula One World Championship. Everything has since gone downhill, with disastrous aerodynamic updates and a management of drivers that is nothing short of hair-pulling. The situation, if you want, has not changed much. Yet, among engineers, the team principal and his teammate, the Monegasque, has people beside him who are completely different from those present only 3 years ago at the beginning of this regulatory era. However, things have not changed. We are still talking about the same old situations. Patience has its limits, but can you imagine Charles Leclerc forced in every interview to squirm when asked the perfectly valid questions from colleagues regarding the potential of this car, which, despite what Vasseur may say, has nothing to offer? Unfortunately, Ferrari fans are destined to live through another season of, let's think about next year because that's how it's going to end. The Monegasque is wasting his undeniable talent on a project that has neither head nor tail, and it must be particularly frustrating to see, for example, Oscar Piastri triumphing race after race in his 3rd year in Formula One, or drivers like Lando Norris, whose skill is significantly inferior to Charles Leclerc's, fighting for the 2nd consecutive season for the Formula One World Drivers' Championship title. Looks speak louder than words. Words, after all, could be carried away by the wind. Let's brush over what was said on French TV regarding the spat with Lewis Hamilton. We truly believe that is the least of the problems right now. Instead, it's better to focus on the rest, which is probably more constructive, but even in his expressions, Charles Leclerc is terribly sincere, as always. Charles Leclerc mentioned that he raced with a lot of frustration, but he emphasized that some issues are better addressed within the Maranello team, and that is what they would do. He said it was a really complicated Sunday, that he had been very angry, and had tried to use the radio as little as possible, although it hadn't been easy. The Ferrari driver repeated that for the past 4 races, including that one, they had been extracting the maximum from the car. Before the last triple header, he felt there was still untapped potential, but that weekend there had been absolutely none. The Monegasque driver added that they needed to understand why he hadn't felt the same way as in previous races. In any case, he stated, they were not fast enough. However, the hesitation in his following words revealed his state of mind. He questioned whether he could believe in the car, explaining that after days like that, the frustration was huge and he didn't want to be positive immediately after such a race. Charles Leclerc assured that he would believe until the end and give everything he had, but they needed to improve and make progress with the car because, at that moment, they were not there. 7th and 8th places for Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton respectively represented a very disappointing Miami Grand Prix for Ferrari, both cars finishing around a minute behind Oscar Piastri's winning McLaren. Rain had been expected, but there was no sign of it during the race, so that reduced the opportunities to move up the order. Therefore, the Maranello team leaves Florida with 16 points, 10 from Sunday's Miami Grand Prix and 6 from Saturday's sprint event. The frustration at the lack of competitiveness probably played a part in a sometimes fractious exchange between the pit wall and the drivers, as Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton, on opposing tire strategies, got in each other's way as they attempted to chase down the 6th-placed Mercedes W16 car of Kimi Antonelli. Lewis Hamilton, from 12th on the grid, started on the hard tire with his Maranello teammate in 8th, choosing the medium as his starting tire. They initially maintained their positions until, after a few laps, the Briton's hard tires began working better than the mediums on the cars around him, allowing him to pass Isaac Hadjar's Racing Bull and Esteban Ocon's Haas. Yuki Tsunoda's Red Bull was the next car in front of him, and this pitted just before the virtual safety car for Oliver Behrman's broken-down Haas. Lewis Hamilton was therefore able to pit under the virtual safety car and get a 10 seconds less costly stop, allowing him to rejoin ahead of Yuki Tsunoda and on the medium tires. The virtual safety car was still in force a lap later, allowing the Monegasque a time-cheap pit stop too as he was switched to the hard tires. He rejoined ahead of Carlos Sainz's Williams, which in turn was just ahead of Lewis Hamilton. Carlos Sainz used his warmer tires to pass Charles Leclerc as the virtual safety car was rescinded, but the Monegasque was able to pressure Carlos Sainz into locking up his brakes into turn 1, pulling the Williams out wide and allowing both Ferraris to pass it. There were 14 laps to go, and Antonelli's hard-tired Mercedes was just under 5s ahead. Lewis Hamilton's medium tires were initially quicker than Leclerc's hards, and with the additional aid of DRS, Lewis Hamilton was right with his teammate and feeling that he had the pace to chase down Kimi Antonelli if Charles Leclerc could be moved aside. The 7-time Formula One world champion was told to wait before it was then suggested he simply stay within Charles Leclerc's DRS range. Lewis Hamilton, feeling he was now damaging his tires in the disturbed air from the other Ferrari, was becoming frustrated and pointed out that he had voluntarily waved Leclerc past in China when the roles were reversed. There were several further tense radio messages that came from the 7-time world champion too, including one that suggested the team could have a tea break while you're at it. Such was the perceived delay in them making a decision. Eventually, Charles Leclerc was told to swap positions, and Hamilton went by in chase of the Mercedes W16 car. But the British driver gained only slowly on the Mercedes. His tires passed their best, just as he'd feared. Furthermore, the Monegasque, his hard tires now fully up to temperature, felt he was now being held up by his teammate. When it was realized that they were not going to catch Kimi Antonelli in time, Lewis Hamilton was instructed to hand the place back to Charles Leclerc. It had not been the best joint operation. One half of a very frustrated Ferrari driver pair, as the team did not make the wrong decision, but something far worse, no decision at all. The indecisiveness cost Hamilton a shot at Antonelli and then cost Leclerc the same thing. To the driver's credit, this was probably the best the car had to offer, which says a lot about where Ferrari are right now. Frustration and a lack of competitiveness from Ferrari is far from where they hope to be at this stage in the 2025 Formula One season. With a European triple header next up, the Italian side will hope for significant improvements to come, and soon. After 6 races in 3 continents, Formula One is finally heading for Europe, with the next round being the Made in Italy and Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix at Imola in a fortnight's time.